Alex had always been drawn to the unknown. The stars, the planets, the endless stretch of space, it was all so vast, so full of mystery. As a young explorer, he had seen his fair share of alien worlds, but nothing could have prepared him for what he found on this barren planet. The sky was dark with swirling clouds, and the air smelled faintly of dust and something ancient. The planet seemed dead. No life, no signs of civilization, only ruins scattered across the landscape like forgotten memories. Alex had come here following a distress signal that had gone unanswered for years. There was no telling who had sent it, but something told him this journey would be different from the others. He made his way across the rocky terrain, following the faint signal from his ship's tracker. The closer he got, the more he felt a sense of unease. The signal was coming from deep underground, hidden in a crumbling complex of old structures. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. After hours of searching, he finally found an entrance almost hidden beneath a thick layer of moss and debris. It was a narrow opening, barely large enough for him to squeeze through, but Alex was determined. He grabbed his flashlight, took a deep breath, and crawled inside. The air inside was stale, and the walls were covered in strange markings that Alex didn't recognize. He continued forward, his heart pounding in his chest as the signal grew stronger. His mind raced with questions. Who had left this message? And why on this forsaken planet? As he rounded a corner, he froze. There, sitting in the shadows, was a figure. At first, Alex thought it might be a statue or some ancient artifact. But as his flashlight illuminated the figure, he saw that it was real. A woman. She was unlike any human Alex had ever seen. Her skin was a pale blue, almost shimmering in the dim light, and her ears were small, pointed, like an elf from a storybook. She wore simple clothing, and though her face seemed calm, there was an air of sadness about her. Her eyes, though fierce, seemed tired, as if they had seen too much. Alex took a cautious step forward, unsure of how she would react. "Hello?" he called softly. His voice echoed in the silence. The woman flinched at the sound of his voice, but she didn't move. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, his heart racing. He took another step closer, but the woman still didn't speak or move. For a moment, Alex thought she might be a survivor from the old civilization. Maybe she was hiding from something, or someone. But as he knelt down in front of her, he saw that she wasn't simply hiding. She looked like she had been here for a long time alone. There was a deep sadness in her eyes, as if something inside her had been broken a long time ago. He reached out slowly, trying to comfort her, but she recoiled, pulling back into the shadows. It was as if she didn't know how to accept his kindness. Alex pulled his hand back, realizing that this woman had likely never known any affection or care in her life. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, trying to reassure her. I'm here to help." The woman studied him carefully, her eyes narrowed. She didn't trust him, and why should she? The world she had grown up in hadn't been kind to her. She had been alone for so long that the idea of anyone offering help, let alone kindness, seemed impossible to her. Alex's heart sank as he realized how much she had been through. She was alone, trapped in this forgotten world, just like the planet she inhabited, forgotten by time and the rest of the galaxy. He wanted to help her. He could feel it in his chest, a strong pull to take care of her, to show her that she wasn't alone anymore. But it was clear that trust would not come easily. "I know it's hard to believe," Alex said quietly, "but I'm not going to leave you here." The woman didn't answer. She only stared at him, unsure of what to make of him. She had never known what it meant to be cared for. She had grown up in a world that valued strength and independence above all else. Feelings, affection and love were weaknesses, things that made you vulnerable. She was not used to kindness. She had never experienced it before. Alex sighed, wondering if he was fooling himself. She had been living in solitude for so long it was almost impossible to imagine her accepting him as a friend, let alone someone who could offer her affection, but he couldn't give up on her. not when she needed him most. With a gentle smile, Alex spoke again, this time with a softness he hadn't used before. I don't know who you are or where you come from, but I'm not going to leave you. I can help you. For the first time, the woman's eyes softened, though she still didn't move. It was a small victory, but it was enough for Alex. She was not ready to trust him yet, but perhaps in time she would. He stood up slowly, offering his hand once more. Come with me. Let's get you out of here. The woman hesitated, her gaze flickering between Alex and the dark, abandoned world she had lived in for so long. She was scared. She didn't know how to respond. But deep inside, she felt something stir, something she had never felt before. Hope. The journey back to Alex's ship was slow. The woman, still wary of him, walked a few paces behind him, her eyes darting around every so often as if expecting danger to jump out at any moment. Alex tried not to press her, understanding that it would take time for her to trust him. The planet they were on had once been a thriving civilization, but now it was a ghost of its former self. The buildings around them were covered in vines and dust, their designs unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Yet the woman, who had yet to tell him her name, didn't seem to notice. She walked with her head down, eyes cast toward the ground. Alex glanced over his shoulder. It's okay, he said gently. We're not far now. I just need to get you to safety. She didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. Alex sighed and tried again. I know you're not used to this, but you don't have to be alone anymore. You don't have to hide. Still, the woman said nothing. Her face was unreadable, her posture stiff. The emotional walls around her seemed as solid as the ruins they walked through. It was clear that she had grown up in a world that had never shown her kindness, and now that she was confronted with it, she didn't know how to handle it. Alex, ever patient, kept walking, knowing that she needed time. The silence between them was heavy, but he refused to give up. When they reached the ship, Alex opened the door and stepped aside to let her in. You're safe here. Take your time. I'll get some food for you. The woman hesitated at the threshold of the ship, looking around as if she wasn't sure if it was a place she should trust. Finally, after a long pause, she stepped inside. Alex smiled at her and moved to the ship's small kitchen area. He busied himself with preparing some simple food. It wasn't much, just some ration packs he kept on hand for long journeys, but it would have to do. As he set the food on the table, he looked over at the woman who was standing still in the corner of the ship, watching him. You can sit down, Alex said softly. I promise it's safe here. For a long moment, the woman didn't move. She simply stared at the food on the table as though unsure of how to approach it. It was as if the concept of eating together, of sharing a meal with someone, was foreign to her. Alex sat down at the table, his posture relaxed. He gestured to the food. I know it's not much, but it's better than nothing. I'll wait until you're ready. She stood there, still unsure, until finally, after what felt like an eternity, she slowly walked over and sat down across from him. She didn't say anything as she picked up the food and ate, her movements slow and deliberate. Alex watched her for a while, trying not to seem too intrusive. He knew she wasn't ready for conversation yet, but he couldn't help himself. What's your name? He asked, his voice gentle. She froze, her eyes flickering up to meet his for the briefest moment. Then, just as quickly, she looked away. It seemed like a question she hadn't heard in a long time. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice soft and almost hesitant. Eris, she said quietly. I'm called Eris. Alex smiled at her. It's nice to meet you, Eris. She looked at him then, her gaze lingering for a moment before she returned to her food. Alex's heart warmed at the sound of her name. It felt like a small victory, an opening. Eris was beginning to trust him, even if just a little. The next few hours were spent in quiet companionship. Alex tried his best to keep things light, offering her as much space as she needed. He knew she wasn't used to being around others, especially not someone like him, a human with emotions and kindness she hadn't experienced before. But as the evening wore on, Alex noticed something small. Eris was beginning to relax, just slightly. She no longer kept her distance as much, and her posture was a little less rigid. It wasn't much, but it was progress. As the night settled in, Alex sat down on the couch watching the stars outside the ship's window. He glanced over at Eris, who had found a small corner of the ship to settle into. She seemed distant, her thoughts elsewhere, but she was no longer avoiding him. She was simply there. "I'm not going anywhere, Eris," Alex said softly, breaking the silence. "You don't have to hide. I'm here, and I'll help you whatever you need." For the first time since their meeting, Eris looked up at him, her eyes wide and searching. She didn't say anything, but Alex could see something in her gaze, a spark of something. Hope? Trust? Or maybe it was just curiosity. Whatever it was, it made his heart ache in the best way. Alex knew they had a long way to go. That earning, her trust would take time, but he was willing to wait. He had all the time in the world. Eris had never known what it was like to be cared for, to have someone look after her without asking for anything in return. She had always been alone, always relied on herself. But now, for the first time in her life, she had someone offering her a hand, someone who cared about her not for what she could do but for who she was. The night grew quiet as the stars outside twinkled, and Alex allowed himself a brief moment of peace. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more obstacles, but for tonight they were together. And that was enough for now. The days that followed were a blur of small steps forward. Eris, who had once been so closed off, was slowly beginning to open, up to Alex. He knew that it wasn't going to be easy. Trust didn't come quickly when you had spent your whole life alone, hiding from the world. But each little moment of progress felt like a victory to Alex. One evening, as they sat together on the ship, Alex noticed that Eris seemed more at ease. She was no longer sitting in the corner avoiding him. She was sitting across from him at the small table, her eyes watching him as he worked on a piece of equipment. "Do you need help with that?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear. Alex looked up in surprise. It wasn't the first time she had spoken, but it was the first time she had offered help. He smiled and nodded. "Sure, if you want to. I could use an extra set of hands." She stood up hesitantly and moved to his side, her movement still unsure but less rigid than before. Alex handed her a tool and showed her how to fix a small malfunction in one of the ship's control panels. To his surprise, she caught on quickly, her fingers moving with surprising dexterity. It was clear she was intelligent, her mind sharp, despite the emotional scars she carried. As they worked together, Alex couldn't help but notice the way her eyes softened as she focused on the task. There was something calming about seeing her engaged, her attention absorbed in something other than the memories of her past. It was as if, for a brief moment, she could forget the loneliness that had defined her life. "You're good at this," Alex remarked with a smile. Eris didn't look up but gave a small nod. "I had to learn how to survive, how to do everything for myself." Alex's smile faded slightly, his heart aching for her. He didn't press her for more details, not wanting to make her uncomfortable, but her words echoed in his mind. She had learned to survive, but had never been taught how to live. They finished the repair in silence, the quiet between them feeling more comfortable than it had before. Eris still wasn't fully at ease with him, but she was no longer as closed off. She wasn't hiding in the corner anymore, and that was enough for Alex. That night, as they sat together to eat, Alex noticed something different about her. She wasn't as distant. Her posture was less tense, and she was even meeting his gaze more often. He knew she still wasn't fully ready to let him in, but it felt like she was inching closer, little by little. "So," Alex began casually, trying to keep the mood light. "Where are you from, Eris? What's your home like?" She froze for a moment, her eyes flickering to the table. For a brief moment, Alex feared he had pushed too far, too soon. But then, To his surprise, she looked up and spoke softly. I don't know what happened to my home, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't remember much. I was raised by the leaders of my people, but they didn't care for us. They only cared about power. When they abandoned us, I was left behind. Alone. Alex's heart tightened. He hadn't expected her to share this much. He knew he had just touched on a painful memory, but he also knew it was important. Eris was trusting him with a piece of her past, and that was something. I'm sorry, Alex said quietly, his voice full of sympathy. I can't. Imagine what that must have been like. Eris didn't respond immediately. She just stared down at her plate, her expression unreadable. Alex gave her space, not wanting to rush her, but a small part of him was relieved. This was the first time she had spoken about her past in any real way, and it felt like a breakthrough. She was starting to trust him, even if only a little. After a long silence, she spoke again, this time more firmly. I've never known what it's like to be loved, she said, her voice steady but quiet. I don't know what it means. I don't know how to accept it. Alex listened intently, his heart aching for her. He could see the pain in her eyes, the conflict within her. She had never known love, not in the way he understood it, and that thought struck him deep. How had she lived without it? How had she survived? You don't have to know everything all at once, Alex said gently. Love doesn't have rules. It's not about knowing what to do. It's about letting yourself feel it, letting yourself trust someone. Eris met his gaze for the first time in what felt like days. Her eyes searched his, and for the first time there was no wall between them. She wasn't fully there yet, but she was starting to let him in. I don't know how, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alex smiled softly, his heart full. That's okay. We'll figure it out together. One step at a time. The rest of the meal passed in a comfortable silence, but Alex felt a sense of warmth in the air. Eris was beginning to understand in her own way what it meant to be cared for. She didn't fully grasp it yet, but she was starting to see it in his actions, in his kindness. And that, Alex knew, was all he could ask for. The night fell around them, and for the first time Eris didn't retreat to her corner of the ship. She stayed close to Alex, sitting across from him as they watched the stars outside. She didn't speak much, but there was a quiet comfort in her presence. And Alex? He knew the journey ahead would be long. There would be moments of doubt, of struggle. But for tonight, just being together was enough. They had taken another step forward, and for now, that was all that mattered. It was a few days after their quiet dinner together when something unexpected happened. Alex and Eris had been traveling through space for several days now, leaving the barren planet behind. The quiet routine of their days, fixing things on the ship, sharing meals, and talking about anything and everything, was beginning to feel almost normal. But today was different. The ship was passing through an asteroid field, and the navigation system was giving a warning that a few large asteroids were coming too close. Alex immediately got to work, adjusting the controls to avoid the collision. Eris stood beside him, watching him work with quiet curiosity. She wasn't as afraid as she had been during their earlier adventures, but the sudden turbulence still made her uneasy. Hold on, Alex said, trying to keep the ship steady as he piloted them through the field. The ship shook slightly with every close pass, but Alex's hands were steady on the controls. He was used to this kind of thing, but Eris wasn't. She had never known space travel, never known what it was like to feel safe while surrounded by the unknown. The ship lurched suddenly as an asteroid grazed the side. Eris stumbled and reached out instinctively, grabbing onto the nearest thing to steady herself, Alex's arm. She held on to him tightly, her fingers digging into his sleeve. The moment was brief, but it lasted long enough for Alex to feel the rawness of her fear. She was afraid, not just of the ship shaking or the asteroids, but of the unfamiliar, of everything she had never been able to control. Alex's heart went out to her, and without thinking, he placed his free hand over hers, offering her a quiet comfort. "It's okay," he said softly, glancing over at her. "We're fine. We've got this." But Eris didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she looked at him, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. Her usual walls had crumbled in an instant, and she couldn't hide her vulnerability anymore. It was a strange feeling being this close to someone else. She had never been close to anyone, not in the way Alex was offering. For the first time, Eris felt the full weight of her emotions. She wasn't just scared of the ship shaking or the dangers of space, but of something much deeper. She had spent so long hiding her pain, keeping everything locked away, that now, in this moment, she could no longer keep it all in. Tears welled up in her eyes, though she didn't let them fall immediately. She didn't understand why she felt this way. Why, after all these years of being alone, she was so afraid to open up to someone. Why she felt this strange, aching need for connection. Alex noticed the change immediately. He could see the flicker of raw emotion in her eyes, something she had tried to hide for so long. Her grip on his arm tightened slightly, not out of fear, but out of a desperate need for comfort. He stopped adjusting the controls for a moment and turned to face her fully, his eyes soft and understanding. "Eris," he said gently, his voice calm. "It's okay to be scared. You don't have to be strong all the time." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I've always had to be strong. I've never known anything else." Her words came out in a whisper, but they were loud enough to break the silence between them. "I don't know how to trust, to let someone in." Alex reached for her hand and gently guided her to sit beside him. The ship was steady now and they were safe, but Eris was clearly shaken by the emotions she had let out. He sat beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," Alex said quietly. "I don't expect you to know how to trust me right away, but you don't have to carry all that weight alone anymore." Eris turned to look at him, her face full of confusion. How do you not expect me to trust you? I don't understand. I've been alone for so long. It's all I know." Alex's heart ached for her. He could see the hurt she had carried with her for years. The pain of never knowing love, of never having anyone to rely on, was something Alex couldn't fully understand, but he could offer something she hadn't had before. The promise of kindness, the promise that he would never leave her. "I'm not asking you to forget what happened before," Alex said, his voice steady. "You've been through so much. I know it's not easy to trust someone after all that, but you don't have to shut yourself off anymore. You don't have to be alone in this." Eris looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch. She had never allowed anyone to be so close to her, never allowed anyone to see her vulnerability. But now, in this moment, with Alex's hand in hers, she felt something shift inside of her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was a small, fragile thread of hope. For the first time in her life, Eris allowed herself to cry. Not out of weakness, but out of relief. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if she could ever truly understand love. But for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. She didn't feel like she had to hide anymore. Alex didn't say anything more. He simply sat beside her, offering his presence. The tears weren't a sign of weakness. They were a sign that Eris was finally beginning to let herself feel something, to trust that it was okay to need someone, to not have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. And as the stars outside the ship twinkled softly, Alex knew that this was just the beginning. They had both taken a step toward something new, something real. The next few days felt different for both Alex and Eris. There was a new understanding between them, one built on shared moments of vulnerability and care. Though Eris was still hesitant, the trust she had started to build in Alex was growing. She no longer kept to the corners of the ship, and she even began to help with small tasks around the ship, something she had never done before. But, as always, seemed to happen in space, danger was never far away. One morning, as the two of them sat in the cockpit enjoying a peaceful moment, the ship's sensors began to blare loudly, signaling an incoming threat. Alex immediately switched into action, his hands moving quickly over the controls as his mind raced. "Eris, get to the back of the ship now," Alex ordered, his voice steady but urgent. Eris, who had begun to relax around Alex, felt the tension creep back into her body as she saw the serious look on his face. She hesitated only for a moment before doing as he asked, her eyes darting toward the monitors to see what was going on. Alex didn't take his eyes off the control panel. "We've got company," he muttered. "Some kind of ship approaching. It's not friendly. Stay down, Eris." Eris's heart raced as she moved toward the back of the ship, instinctively reaching for the small blaster that Alex had shown her how to use. She had never fired it, but she had learned to hold it steady. The thought of defending herself was strange to her, but she was starting to realize that she couldn't rely on Alex to protect her all the time. She needed to be able to protect herself too. Meanwhile, Alex was already preparing for the worst. His hands worked quickly on the ship's controls, attempting to dodge the enemy ship's fire. He had flown through dangerous situations before, but this time, there was something different about the stakes. It wasn't just his life on the line. He had someone with him now, someone he had promised to protect. As the enemy ship drew closer, Alex knew they wouldn't be able to outrun it. They had to fight back. "Eris, I need you up here," Alex called out, his voice tight with concentration. "Now!" Eris wasted no time. She ran to the front of the ship, her blaster gripped tightly in her hands. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she was ready for whatever came next. She slid into the seat beside Alex, her body tense. She could feel the weight of the moment, but Alex didn't seem scared. He was focused, calm. And that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could handle this too. "We need to disable their weapons," Alex explained quickly. "Get ready to fire." Eris didn't say anything. She just nodded, gripping the controls as Alex aimed the ship at their attackers. A quick calculation ran through Alex's mind. He needed just the right angle to take down the enemy ship's engines. He lined up the shot and gave the command. "Now, Eris." With a deep breath, Eris pulled the trigger. The ship's weapons fired, and she watched as the enemy ship's shields flickered and weakened. It was a hit, but the enemy wasn't going down that easily. They returned fire, shaking their ship violently. Alex gritted his teeth and swerved the ship just in time to avoid a direct hit. Eris gripped the console, her heart pounding. For a moment, she forgot about everything except the task at hand. She was fighting. She was a part of this now. After a few tense moments, Alex found the perfect angle. He fired again, this time targeting the enemy ship's engines. With a final sharp burst, their ship went dark. The attack ship was disabled. Alex let out a breath of relief as he steadied the ship. The threat was over. They had made it. But even as the immediate danger passed, Eris could feel the rush of adrenaline leaving her body. Her hands shook slightly as she lowered the blaster. She had never been in a situation like that before. But in that moment, she realized something important. She hadn't been alone. Alex had been right there with her, guiding her. He had trusted her to fight back. Alex looked over at her, a small, relieved smile on his face. "You did good, Eris. Really good." Eris was still catching her breath. She hadn't expected to feel so powerful. The thought of standing by Alex, of fighting alongside him, was new to her. It was different from anything she had ever known. She glanced at him, her eyes searching for something, anything, to say. But all she could do was nod. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex's smile softened. He could see that Eris was starting to understand. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning to fight to protect herself, and, maybe even more importantly, she was learning to trust in him. The moment passed, and the ship was silent again. They both knew the battle wasn't over. There would always be more dangers, lurking out there in the vastness of space. But for now, they had each other. And that was something neither of them had ever experienced before. Eris had come so far since their first meeting. She had gone from a woman who couldn't trust anyone to someone who had fought beside him to protect their lives. That was a victory in itself, and Alex knew in that moment that he would always stand by her, no matter what the galaxy threw their way. The ship settled into a steady course once more, and for the first time since their arrival in space, the silence between them felt like peace. It wasn't just the absence of danger, it was the calm that came from knowing they could face anything together. The days after the battle felt different. The tension in the air had finally lifted, but Eris could still feel the weight of the moment. She had never known that kind of fear, the kind that came from not knowing whether you would survive. But she had also never known that kind of strength, the strength that had come from standing beside Alex and facing it together. For the first time in her life, Eris felt something more than just the need to survive. She felt something else. Something she couldn't name yet, but it was there. The trust she had in Alex was growing, and so was the strange feeling that came with it. She wasn't just relying on him anymore. She was beginning to feel connected to him in a way she hadn't experienced with anyone before. Alex had noticed the change in her too. He saw the small ways in which she was starting to relax, the way she looked at him more often, the way she no longer avoided his gaze. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. It was something real. One afternoon, after they had completed another round of repairs on the ship, Alex and Eris stood together by the observation window, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy stretched out before them, endless and beautiful. For a moment, there was only silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. I've never really had the chance to just look at the stars, Eris said quietly, breaking the silence. I was always too busy trying to survive. Alex turned to her, his face soft with understanding. He could see how much she had carried, how much she had lived through, and how hard it had been for her. But here, now, with him, she didn't have to fight anymore. She didn't have to be alone. Yeah, I know what you mean, Alex said, his voice calm. Sometimes it's hard to just stop and look around. Life can be so busy, but the stars, they don't change. They're always there. Eris nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars outside. It's beautiful, she whispered. I never saw the beauty before. I didn't know it was even there. There was something in her voice, something that made Alex's heart ache. She had been so focused on surviving, on protecting herself, that she had never stopped to see the world for what it truly was. And now with him she was starting to see it. She was beginning to see the possibilities. You know, Alex said, breaking the quiet, there's a whole universe out there, so many places, so many people, and you don't have to go through it alone anymore. I'm here. Eris looked at him, her expression a mixture of wonder and hesitation. I don't know how to be with someone, she said quietly, as if admitting a secret. I've never had anyone care for me like this. I don't know how to be loved. Alex's heart swelled at her words. He reached out gently, taking her hand in his. You don't have to know how. You just have to let yourself feel it. Let yourself trust it. And I'll be here, no matter what. Eris stared at their joined hands, her thumb brushing over his fingers. She had never imagined this, never imagined being cared for, loved. It was terrifying, and yet, it was also the most comforting thing she had ever experienced. I'm scared, she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. It's okay to be scared. I am too. But we're in this together, and that's all that matters. They stood there side by side in the quiet of the ship, watching the stars. For the first time, Eris didn't feel the need to hide from the world. She didn't feel the need to shut herself off from the warmth that Alex was offering her. She didn't know if she was ready to love him, but she knew that she was ready to try. And that, in itself, was a huge step. Over the next few days, their relationship grew stronger. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, of uncertainty. But with every passing day, they both learned more about each other. Aris learned to trust him more, to accept the care he offered her. And Alex in turn learned how to be patient, how to support her without pushing too hard. One evening, as they sat together in the lounge of the ship, Alex finally asked her a question he had been wondering about for some time. "So, Aris," he began, his voice casual but full of curiosity, "what do you want to do now? What's next for you?" Aris looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. It was a question she had never really considered before. She had always been focused on survival, on getting by. But now, with Alex by her side, the future seemed a little clearer. There were possibilities she had never imagined. "I don't know," she said slowly. "I've never really had a choice. But maybe I want to see the universe. I want to see what's out there. I want to be free." Alex smiled, his heart lifting at her words. "Then we'll do that," he said simply. "We'll go together. Wherever you want to go, we'll go." For the first time, Aris smiled. It was a small smile, but it was enough. In that moment, she felt the stirrings of something new, something hopeful. She didn't know what the future would hold, but with Alex beside her, she was ready to face it. The stars outside continued to twinkle, a reminder of the endless possibilities that awaited them. And for the first time in a long time, Aris felt like she could breathe. She could dream, she could hope. Together, they were beginning a new chapter, a new beginning. The days turned into weeks, and for the first time, Aris felt like she was truly living. She had spent so many years trapped by her own fears, bound by a past that refused to let her go. But with Alex, things were different. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't fighting for survival every moment. She was starting to live. And Alex? He was everything she hadn't known she needed. He was patient, kind, and gentle with her in ways she had never experienced. He gave her space when she needed it and comfort when she felt lost. But most importantly, he never asked her to be anything she wasn't. He accepted her as she was. And that was the most profound thing of all. They had begun to travel again, leaving the safety of the ship behind for new worlds. Alex showed her the wonders of the galaxy, planets with lush forests, endless oceans, and cities that gleamed under twin suns. They visited planets full of vibrant life, and others that were nothing but dust. Everywhere they went, Aris was struck by how big the universe was, and how small her previous life had seemed in comparison. One afternoon, they found themselves on a beautiful planet with rolling hills and golden fields, stretching as far as the eye could see. The sky was a soft blue with wisps of clouds scattered across it. The sun bathed the land in a warm golden light. Aris had never seen anything like it. It was peaceful, calming, and for the first time she felt at peace with herself. Alex sat beside her, both of them watching the sunset. "This place is incredible," he said, his voice soft. "It's hard to believe a place like this exists, isn't it?" Aris nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I never thought I would get to see something like this. I never thought I'd get to be here, to experience the world like this." Alex smiled at her, his heart swelling with emotion. "And you deserve it, Aris. You deserve to see all the beauty this universe has to offer." She turned to look at him, the soft glow of the setting sun reflecting in her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel something deeper than just the need to survive. She felt gratitude for the moments she had, for the new life she was creating with Alex by her side. "Thank you," she whispered, the words coming more easily now. "For everything, for showing me that there's more to life than just surviving." Alex reached out and gently touched her hand. His fingers brushed over hers in a quiet, reassuring gesture. "You don't have to thank me, Aris. I'm just glad you're here with me. You've been through so much, and I'm happy I can be here for you. I'm not going anywhere." Aris felt the warmth of his words sink deep into her heart. She had never known someone could care so deeply, so unconditionally. The idea of having someone who would stand by her no matter what was still new to her. But with each passing day, it was becoming easier to accept. We've been through a lot, haven't we? Eris said, her voice full of wonder. Alex chuckled softly. Yeah, we have. But you know what? We've made it. And we're stronger because of it. Together, we can face whatever comes next. Eris smiled at him, the weight of her past slowly lifting. She had spent so much time hiding from her pain, afraid to let anyone in. But now, with Alex, she was finally learning that it was okay to trust. It was okay to love. The sunset began to fade, and the stars started to appear, one by one, filling the sky above them. It was a sight that Eris had never truly understood before. To her, the stars had always just been distant lights in the sky. But now, they felt like something more. They felt like home. For a moment, Eris closed her eyes and allowed herself to imagine a future with Alex. A future where she didn't have to be afraid anymore. A future where she could be loved and give love in return. A future where she wasn't just surviving, but truly living. I want to stay with you, Alex, she said softly, her voice steady. I want to see the universe. I want to explore with you. I want to live. Alex's heart skipped a beat and he smiled at her, his eyes filled with affection. You don't have to ask, Eris. We're in this together. We always will be. And as they sat there side by side watching the stars above, Eris realized something. She had never truly known love before, but now she understood it. Love was not just about receiving, it was about giving, trusting, and sharing a life together. And in Alex, she had found someone who showed her that love every single day. Together, they would face whatever challenges the universe threw their way. Together, they would explore, discover, and build a future. Because for the first time in her life, Eris was not alone. She had someone who cared for her, someone who would always be there by her side, and that in itself was more than enough.